edition of Dialogues, I'd like to dwell a bit on the aspect of change, something that metamorphosis signifies. So how can architects and designers be change makers? And here's my 2 cents about it. We're a room full of architects and designers, so what's your architecture archetype? What I mean is, if you look back, right, through the years, especially in the subcontinent, you had the era of master architects. Think Charles Correa, B.V. Doshi, and the likes, stalwarts who were path breakers, much celebrated. Projects of theirs are still very relevant even today. Moving on from there, we had urbanization. A lot of people started coming into the cities, and there was a large stress on larger projects, a push for mass housing, infrastructure, and this led to the architect of standards. Think efficiency, think procedures, compliance, trying to make the most of every bit, quick turnarounds. There was an era of architect of standards, and that was one aspect of it. And on the flip side, we have the bespoke architect, style-driven with a very keen sense of aesthetic, catering to a slightly niche segment. So whoever you are and whatever you identify with, all of us work in these different segments, right? You could be doing a private residence for an individual, or you could be working for a developer doing slightly larger projects, be it an office building or a shopping mall of stuff, right? This is more of a semi-public kind of typology. Or you could liaise with the government and do public spaces. So these are the different aspects in which most of us operate under. And what we've noticed, or what's significantly becoming more important, is there is a shift globally and locally to move beyond aesthetics towards performative architecture that's centered around process. Even the previous gentleman who spoke about the importance of process, and I think that's key in bringing about any kind of change. So how do architects respond to changing times? To talk about this more, I'll probably give you a small anecdote. There's a popular uh, a philosopher called Isaiah Berlin, who was a British-Russian philosopher who draws interesting parallels between the hedgehog and the fox. He says the hedgehog focuses on accumulating knowledge by looking at the world through a singular lens, whereas the fox focuses on different ways of learning by looking at the world through multiple lenses. I'm not saying one of them is right or either of them, but if you apply that same logic to ourselves as designers and architects, we're often forced to view the world through a myriad of different lenses. Architecture, design is one of them, but you have to collaborate with so many different people. And and architecture has always been a very multidisciplinary kind of a field. So today, this entire focus on multidisciplinary, being process-driven, bringing about a very integrated approach, I think these are keys to bringing about significant change. So redefining convention, taking into consideration all these aspects that I spoke about, I'll just quickly talk about 3 projects where we believe we were successful in bringing about change to certain small aspects. The first project is an industry, and when you talk about industrial architecture, most of us have this image of an almost dilapidated shed, right? So this particular facility is additive manufacturing or 3D printing. And this client is a 70-year-old steel company working out of Kerala. So traditionally, if you know, steel manufacturing, extremely laborious process. It involves a lot of foundries where, molten metal is often poured into timber molds, which are time consuming. Each mold takes about 3 to 4 months to make. So this was a company who's been doing that for 70 years. And as a paradigm shift, the new facility was adopting 3D printing or additive manufacturing to make the molds. So something which took about 2 to 3 months now takes 3 days. So this was the paradigm shift that the company was undergoing, and they wanted us to create a facility that signifies this paradigm shift. So what was important was to create a facility that is very recognizable. Now, as you know, the entire process of steel casting, very laborious. You have on one side, a worker who's been working in the foundry for about 2, 3 decades. On the other side, you have this, very suave engineer who's globally well-traveled, is talking about 3D printing. So it was very important to create a facility that's not alien to the former, but at the same time, it has a very global outlook. I won't go too much in detail about the architecture and stuff, but there's certain aspects of it where, the change part of it is very significant. So, the aesthetic draws inspiration from the industries of yore. Very simple, very simple, straightforward approach to it. The site faced, south and west, which is probably the most harshest, direction and orientation. It features a sawtooth edge, which allows a lot of diffused light into it. And onto the west, because a lot of offices were located, we envisaged this secondary screen that shields it and provides adequate shade. And that's a cross-section of what the facility is. Just to give you an idea, that's the 3D printing machine that I was talking to you about. It's the world's largest silicon 3D printing machine. There's only probably, this is 1 out of 6 in the world, and this is the one which replaces the traditional technique of making molds out of timber. That's the design center overlooking the shop floor. The site's interesting. It's an acre site, and the shop floor pretty much occupied the entire site. And since we don't have a basement, all the setback was given up to surface parking. And we realized that on such a lovely corner-facing plot, we didn't have any opportunity for landscape. There was no place to have trees because we have to use all of that for parking. So what we figured as a canvas was this entire large screen, and within 8 months, we transformed that into something like this, where we could grow, say, a 25-meter tall tree in 8 months. These were just creepers. Apart from the aesthetics, what it does is it creates a lovely environment within the office floor where, despite being facing the west, none of these areas ever draw blinds. And I think that's testimony to good process and, having centered the entire design process. So another small project that I'd like to talk about, something that's common to all of us, the mundane aspect of parking. I'm sure all of us, whether you go to an office building or a shopping mall, you have this entire idea of going into a dingy basement or a multi-level parking. In this particular project, we tried to reinvent the way we approach parking, try and celebrate the park in parking. So the project is called The Rock. This is a multi-level car park in a large campus in Bombay. And that's the campus. This is about 25 acres of speculative commercial real estate in Goregaon, an old textile mill. And this campus was done over a period of 15 years. And the project in question is the one in color. The rest of the ones in white were previously done. This is the particular project. And despite having 3 basements, we are still running short of car parking. And we realized we had to accommodate close to 400 more car parks. And the only way to do that was to try and have a multi-level car park. And usually when we approach, urban design, master planning, usually these kind of facilities are pushed aside into a corner where nobody can see. But that was the only place that we had left, and that pretty much becomes the central focal of this 25-acre campus. So instead of trying to make it nondescript, we tried to celebrate this entire parking structure. And the idea came about by trying to create this landscaped mound, and that's why it's called The Rock. We wanted it to look very non-orthogonal. We wanted to almost make it look like a landscape mound. So a few of the initial concept sketches, a few renders, and this particular car park houses close to 400 cars and the entire electrical infrastructure of the campus. So on the ground floor, you have close to 13 diesel generators. The entire electrical infra of the campus works out of there. But visually, it just looks like a landscape mound. There is no dedicated ramp. The entire car parking facility is like the ramp. It's like the Guggenheim. So it's a gentle 1 in 25, 1 in 30 slope where you park. And the idea is, wherever you park, on the 7th floor, 6th floor, It's connected to a series of landscape stairways which allow a user to take a walk through a park before going into the office. So these were the initial concepts and renders. That was a visualization of what this could look like, and that's what it looks like right now. And again, because it's covered in landscape, it's ever changing. You go during one particular season, there's a lot of flowers on the building. Maybe in the drier season, it's slightly more sparse. So the landscape character, the character of the rock is always changing through the season. And this is what I mean. So this is like the 6th or 7th floor. You park, you get out onto the series of walkways and stairs, which are very well landscaped. And on the rooftop, there's a nice restaurant. So it gives you enough incentive to climb 7 stories. A few more images of what the facility looks like. So that's the office building that we did, which has 3 basements, doing a lot, and the rest of the parking is accommodated over here. And that's the staircase and the walkway that I spoke to you about. The last project that I'd like to speak about, something that all of us will relate to. Every couple of months, you watch the news and there's some new city that is getting flooded. Urban, flooding is a serious concern, and if you pay attention to this guy over here, his expression, I think, captures all our thoughts, right? We all live in nice cities, but we are plagued by woes of, poor infrastructure. So, infraculture, right? This is a project where we took a relook at the water systems of Bangalore. We tried to reclaim it. The project's called K100. It is a small pilot which takes a relook at all the stormwater drains in Bangalore. And it's an effort to reclaim it, make it functional. Bangalore has a system of close to 60 to 70 kilometers of stormwater drains across the city. They function really well if they're supposed to function the way they were designed. But unfortunately, the current, the rapid progress in terms of infrastructure, which is often knee-jerk, and this is the current state of stormwater drains. I mean, if that drain was working to its capacity, we wouldn't have issues like this. And our first pilot was about 5 kilometers. And one of the first things that we did is we tried to clear the silt. And I kid you not, it was about 25,000 truckloads of silt that was cleared in 5 kilometers of stormwater drain. That itself, was good enough to, reclaim the capacity of the stormwater. So from that, we started working on interventions where these were, often looked as gray infrastructure, not really pleasant areas where you would want to go and hang out. Simple interventions like how do you break this barrier? How do you allow people to walk by it? So this is the current condition of that stormwater drain. These were certain proposals that we made. Simple theories. All of us studied about Jane Jacobs, eyes on the street. How do you make places, public space more safer? So these were a few strategies that we devised. Taking forward, these were the different kind of agencies that we had to deal with. Remember, I spoke about the hedgehog and the fox. I said you have to look at the world through multiple lenses. And this is often the case when you work with the government. You often have to liaise with multiple agencies who not often talk to each other, and you become the common ground trying to connect all of them. And by doing that, simple interventions like, having policy in place for garbage collection, breaking down the edges, making the edge a lot more porous, allowing people to come in. The minute something is visible, people also reclaim it. There's a sense of ownership. And I think that's key for public infrastructure in India. So by interventions like these, where there was no visual connect and allowing people to access it, this is the kind of impact that we could create, where this is the first pilot that I spoke about. All of this a few years back was completely derelict. Nobody used to hang out here. And the way the drain has been done, it's very seasonal. In the dry season, when there's no rain, it's a place where you can hang out, where you can walk, where you can come down, the idea of ghats. And then once it's, peak monsoons, all of this is designed to get full. The drain works at full capacity. And it's lovely to see people come and reclaim the city as their own. And I think that's going to be key for public infrastructure. So that was a render or a visual of what the pilot could look like, and that's what it looks like right now. And like I said, small interventions, big impact, and through these series of interventions, we truly believe that we could create some kind of change. Thank you.